friends. Today, I just want to read you the book, which is The Sleeping Beauty. I hope you enjoy. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who lacked but one thing on earth to make them entirely happy. The king was young, handsome, and wealthy. The queen had a nature as good and gentle as her face was beautiful, and they adored one another, having married for love, which among kings and queens is not always the rule. Moreover, they reigned over a kingdom at peace, and their people were devoted to them. What more, then, could they possibly want? Well, they wanted one thing very badly, and the lack of it grieved them more than words can tell. They had no child. Vows, pilgrimages, always were tried, yet for a long while nothing came of it all. And the poor queen especially was in despair. At last, however, to her own and her husband's inexpressibly joy, she gave birth to a daughter. As soon as the palace guns announced their event, the whole nation whirled wild with delight. Flags waved everywhere, bells were set pealing until the steps rocked. Crowds tossed up their hats and cheered, while the soldiers present, arms, and even strangers meeting in the street fell upon each other's neck, exclaiming, "Our queen has a daughter! Yes, yes, our queen has a daughter! Long live the little princess!" A name had now to be found for the royal baby, and the king and queen, after taking over some scores of names, at length decided to call her Aurora, which means the dawn. The dawn itself, thought they, was never more beautiful than this darling of theirs. The next business, of course, was to hold a christening. They agreed that it must be a magnificent one, and as a first step they invited all the fairies they could find in a land to be godmothers to the Princess Aurora, that each one of them might bring her as a gift, as was the custom with fairies in those days, and so she might have all the perfections imaginable. After making so inquiries, for I should tell you that all this happened not so many 100 years ago, when fairies were already growing somewhat scarce. They found 7. But this again pleased them, because 7 is a lucky number. After the ceremonies of the christening, while the trumpeters sounded their fanfares, and the guns boomed out again from the great tower. All the company returned to the royal palace to find a great feast arrived. Seats of honor had been set for the 7 fairy godmothers, and before each was laid a dish of honor, with a dish cover of solid gold, and beside the dish a spoon, a knife, and a fork, all of pure gold, and all set with diamonds and rubies. But just as they were seating themselves at table, to the dismay of everyone, there appeared in the doorway an old crone dressed in black and leaning on a crutch stick. Her chin and her look nose almost met together, like a pair of nutcrackers, for she had very few teeth remaining, but between them she growled to the guest in a terrible voice, "I'm the very ugly in. Pray where your king's manners, that I have not been invited." She had in fact been overlooked, and this was not surprising because she lived at the far end of the country in a lonely tower set round by the forest. For 50 years she had never come out of this tower, and everyone believed her to be dead or enchanted. That you must know, in the commonest way the fairies have of ending, they lock themselves up in a tower or within a hollow oak and are never seen again. The king, though she chose to accuse his manners, was in fact the politest of men. He hurried to express his regrets, led her to table with his own hand, and ordered a dish to be set for her, but with the best will in the world he could never give her a dish cover such as the other's hand, because 7 only had been made for the 7 invited fairies. The old crone receives his excuses with ungraciously while accepting a seat. It was plain that she had taken deep offense. One of the younger fairies, Hippolyta by name, who sat by, overheard her mumbling trees between her teeth, and fearing she must bestow some unlucky gift upon the little princess, but as soon as she rose from table and hid herself close by the cradle behind the tapestry, that she might have the last word and undo so far as she could whatever the fairy Eglin might have in her mind. She had scarcely concealed herself before the other fairies began to advance one by one to bestow their gifts on the princess. The youngest promised her that she should be the most beautiful creature in the world. The next, that she should have the wit of an angel. The third, a marvelous grace in all her ways. The fourth, that she should dance to perfection. The fifth, that she should sing like a nightingale the sixth that she should play exclusively on all instruments of music. Now came the third of the old fairy Aglain. Her head nodded with spite and old age together, as she bent over the cradle and shook her crutched staff above the heart, above the head of the pretty babe, who slept on sweetly, too young and too innocent as yet to dream of any such things as mischief in this world. This is my gift to you, Princess Aurora, announced the hag, still in her cracking voice that shook as spitefully as her body. I promise that one day you shall pierce your hand with a spindle, and on that day you shall surely die. You shall surely die. As these terrible words of the poor queen fell back fainting into her husband's arms, a trembling seized the royal court. The ladies were in tears, and the younger lords and knights were calling out the seas and burn the wicked witch. When the young fairy stepped forth from behind the tapestry and passing by Aglain, who stood scornful in the midst of this outcry, she thus addressed their majesties. Take comfort, O king and queen. Your daughter shall not die hers. It is true, I have not the power wholly to undo what this elder sister of mine has done. The princess must indeed pierce her hand with a spindle, but instead of dying, she shall only fall into the deep slumber that shall last for many, many years, at the end of which a king's son shall come and awake her. Whenever this misfortune happens to your little Aurora, do not doubt that I, the fairy Hippolyte, her grandmother, shall get news of it and come at once to render what help may. Her head nodded with spite and old age together as she bent over the cradle. The king, while declaring himself infinitely obligated to the good fairy Hippolyta, could not help feeling that hers was but cold comfort at the best. He gave others to close the christening festivities at once, although the fairy Aglain, their spoiled joy, had already taken her departure, passing unarmed through the crowd of folk, every one of whom wished her ill, and riding away, it was generally agreed upon a broomstick. To satisfy the king's faithful subjects, however, who were unaware of any misadventure, the pale-faced fireworks were duly let off, with a grand set-piece wishing long life to the Princess Aurora noise and hissing the catering wheels, retired to a private room with a chamberlain, and there, still amid the noise of explosions and cheerings, drew up the first harsh proclamation of his reign. It forbade everyone, on pain of death, to use a spindle in spinning, or even to have a spindle in his house. Heralds took copies of the proclamation and marched through the land reading it to the sound of trumpets from every marketplace, and it gravely puzzled and distressed all who listened, for their women folk prided themselves on their linen. Its fineness was a byword throughout the neighboring kingdoms, and they knew themselves to be famous for it. But what sort of linen, they said, would His Majesty have us spin with our spindles? They had a great affection, however, as we have seen, for their monarch, and for 15 or 16 years all the spinning wheels were silent throughout the land. The little Princess Aurora grew up without ever having seen one. But one day, the king and the queen, being absent at one of their country houses, she gave her governess sleep, and running at will through the place and upstairs from the chamber to another, it came at length to a turret with a winding staircase, from the top of which a strange reeling sound attracted her and seemed to invite her to climb. As she mounted after the sound, on a sudden it ceased, but still she followed the stairs and came, at the very top, to an open door, through which she looked in upon a small garret where sat an honest old woman alone, winding her distaff. The good soul had never in 16 years heard of the king's prohibition against spindles, and this is just the sort of things that happens in palaces. "What are you doing, Goody?" asked the princess. "I'm spinning, pretty one," answered the old woman, who didn't know who she was. "Spinning? What is it?" "I wonder sometimes," said the old woman, "what the world is coming to in these days." And that, of course, was naturally enough, and might occur to anybody after living so long as she had lived in a garret on the top of the tower. "Spinning," she said wisely, "is spinning or was, and gentle or simple, no one is fit to keep house until she has learned to spin. But how pretty it is," she said to the princess. "How do you do it? Give it to me and let me see if I can do so well." She had no sooner grasped the spindle. She was over eager, perhaps, or just a little bit clumsy, or maybe the very degree had so ordained it. Then it pierced her hand and she dropped down in a swoon. She all trod in a flurry ran to the heart of the stairs and called for help. There was no bell rope, and her voice being weak with age and her turret in the remotest corner of the palace, it was long before anyone heard her in the servants' hall. The servants, too, in the absence of the king and queen, were playing cards and could not be interrupted by anybody until their game was finished. Then they sat down and discussed whose business it was to attend on a call from that particular church, and this again proved to be a nice point, since nobody could remember having been summoned thereafter, and all were against setting up a precedent, as they call it. In the end, they decided to send up the lowest of the junior page boys. But he had a weakness which he somehow forgot to mention, that of fainting at the sight of blood. So when he reached the garret and fainted, the old woman had to begin screaming over again. This time they sent up a scullery maid who, being good-natured and unused to the ways of the palace, made the best haste she could to the garret, whence presently she returned with the terrible news. The servants, who had gone back to their game, now dropped their cards and came running. All the household, in fact, came pouring up the third states. The palace physicians themselves crowding in such numbers that the poor Princess Aurora would have been hard to put to it, for fresh air have restored her. They dashed water on her face, unlaced her, slapped her hands, tickled the soles of her feet, burned her feathers under her nose, rubbed her temples with hungry water. They held consultations over her by 2,000 trees, and again in grand committee, but nothing would bring her to